One of the traps that I see so many people fall into is this kind of over explanation trap, justifying your value, over explaining your services. This exhaustion and this desperate energy is the very last thing I ever want anyone to bring to a sales conversation. Before we get into today's episode, I am just going to extend an invitation to you. We're on episode 5 of the authority season now, guys. And if you've been listening along, you're nodding your head, you're thinking, yep, there's more work for me to do in this space. I just want to invite you to apply to join the regional experts. It is a space that I am so phenomenally proud of. It is honestly a space that I created when I had, 5 hours of childcare. I knew I needed to build a scalable business. I knew that I was having, before I went on maternity leave, the same conversations with so many different women, but it was the same conversations. And I also know that, two heads are better than one. And in the regional experts, not only is there the mastermind of every other woman in there running an incredible business, there's also our support coaches, Meredith, who acts as my OBM, as well as the tech and systems and automation coach for you guys. And then there's Laura, who's our copy support, social media messaging coach. So you get access to two other incredible experts. Me, the community, it is just a phenomenal space, and it has grown so much over the last 4 years. It's now 4 years old officially. So if you think that growing your authority, leading with authority, getting paid for your brain, not just the hours you're working, if you're ready to make that transition, then I would love to invite you to apply. And if you're sitting here thinking that there's no way out of this kind of time for money exchange, I really want to tell you there is a way out. And it doesn't have to be charging an hourly rate. And before I kind of get into this episode about over explaining yourself, I want you guys to know that in 2019, I think, or maybe 2020, I had a government contract. I was still in my business, but I had a government contract and I was being subsidized for the work that I was doing. I was charging an hourly rate. They were paying me an hourly rate. And then the clients would pay a very nominal fee. The clients are paying $20 an hour to access me. Now, I was making more behind the scenes, but my perceived value on the front foot 6, 7 years ago was $20 an hour. And I had to shift away from that because the perceived value was so low, it was impacting every other service that I had available. And I was having to service almost 100 people to get anywhere close to the kind of money I wanted to make in a month. And it was absurd. And so if you're thinking that you can't move out of the time for money trap, know that I did it. And it was freaking scary to say no to a very healthy contract and subsidy. But the perceived value was having such a negative impact that it looked like I was only worth $20 an hour, which I don't think anyone ever in the history of me being in business is paid that in Australia. So it doesn't have to be that way. But one of the traps that I see so many people fall into is this kind of over explanation trap, justifying your value, over explaining your services. This exhaustion and this desperate energy is the very last thing I ever want anyone to bring to a sales conversation. And yes, there is an element of confidence that has to go with it. And I'm smiling because I'm thinking of one of my brilliant customers who she came to me and she was charging an hourly rate. We did her first proposal and, we loaded it up. I was like, let's make the top end offer pretty hefty. That way you really can blow them out of the water with your service. You can over deliver and then you feel like you're compensated for it. So we really did that. And we built an amazing proposal out. She sent it off to the clients thinking that they're going to take the mid-tier offer, and they took the top tier. And so there is an element of let's let the work speak for itself, but you've got to have the confidence to back yourself, and you've got to have the ability to say, you know what, I'm positioning this the very best way that I can. And I just want you to think about the last sales conversation that you had. If you're in this trap of talking about, this is what I do, this is why it works, this is why I'm qualified, this is why the price is fair, this is everything I'm going to give you. If you're in this trap of just these are your deliverables, here's this thing, here's this thing, here's this thing, that means that there likely coming into the conversation without context. They don't have the context of your authority, of your positioning. And so they're not necessarily arriving to the conversation pre-sold. I want your conversation, your sales conversation, to be a logistics conversation, not a convincing conversation. I want it to be a logistics conversation in that this is what I can do for you, and this is what it looks like to get started. And you could start on these dates, and these are the payment options. It's about the logistics. It's about how we're getting started. What's the next step here? Because if we're staying in this kind of trap of explaining and explaining and explaining and explaining, that is going to have such a drain on your energy. It's going to have a drain on your own credibility. You're having to start from scratch every single time. Every time you start a sales conversation, these people have no idea who you are, no idea the kind of services you can deliver, and you're starting from scratch every time. And it's going to feel completely different when you have someone arriving at sales conversations just ready to buy. It just feels different. And I want you to recognize that it doesn't have to feel like constantly justifying the hourly rate, constantly explaining yourself, constantly saying, this is why I'm the best. And I want your sales dynamic to change. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to get people who don't know exactly who you are, or maybe they haven't done the research, or they're a bit cold to the market. But as a whole, I want the inquiries that are coming in for you to feel different. I want people to already understand the value of working with you. I want them to be asking, am I the right fit to work with you? Am I at the right level? And they're already making this assumption that you're for them, but they're not questioning, price. They're not questioning your services, your credibility. I want your sales call shorter. I want your groundwork to already be done entering these conversations. And I don't ever want you to feel this like massive emotional attachment to price. I actually had this conversation with a client. It would have been in the last 6 weeks or so about feeling emotionally attached to price. And how every time she puts her prices out or a proposal out, it feels like this massive emotional trigger. And if someone says no, it feels like this massive emotional rejection, and it's tied inherently to her self-worth. And I want us to do everything we can to separate you from your price. And one of the things that can help support that is premium positioning, is having really solid offers so that the objections are no longer, I can't afford it, or that value doesn't make sense, that we're shifting away from that, because we want that kind of defensive, desperate mechanism to go away. I want you to stop bracing for pushback, because honestly, the right clients already see the value. They're already recognizing it. And so this is not necessarily about being more confident on sales calls, but it's about doing the work upstream before the sales conversation happens, so that the sale is mostly done before the call happens. And that is exactly where shifting into authority and having visible authority helps conversations, or helps the selling process upstream before the point of conversion. It's that nurturing that we always hear about, how are we nurturing, or middle of funnel. Maybe that's a term you've heard thrown around. It's that middle of funnel nurturing content, nurturing positioning that's going to really help that upstream sales conversation, so that by the time we get to the conversion and we get to the nitty gritty, a lot of the sale is already done for you. Now, how do we ensure that we are moving away from this kind of hourly rate mentality and truly getting paid for your thinking? So many people are stuck in this pricing for delivery, like pricing for the hours, the output, the doing. And getting paid for your thinking is, you're getting paid for your experience, your framework, and your judgment. You're not getting paid for, I spent an hour and here's $1. You are getting paid for a different frame of deliverables. And I think what's really important in this is getting clear on what you actually know that others don't. I think that that's so important, is that you are very clear on like, what's my competitive edge? What's the cut through that I've got that other people don't? And then being in a position where that competitive edge is so visible that it's undeniable. And when both of those are in place, price becomes kind of secondary, because it's like, you're the obvious choice. I know you're the obvious choice because I've seen it around the internet, and people aren't shopping for the cheapest option. they're looking for the right person because that person is visibly available and the conversation is occurring before we're even having the conversion conversation. So they're able to learn so much about you, learn about your process, learn about your frameworks, learn about who you are, learn about the transformation you can provide, not about just like the deliverables and the hours. So if you have expertise and you're ready to stop hiding behind deliverables, then now is the time, honestly. Like, now is the time to draw the line in the sand and change things and stop charging an hourly rate. I had a conversation with my OBM last month and I was drawing all sorts of lines in the sand. And I was like, this is a non negotiable. On this date, we're doing this. And honestly, I feel so much better now that I drew some lines in the sand. It doesn't mean that we're just completely changing anything or anything like that. It just meant that I'd given myself a boundary and some things were changing and I was not going to be negotiating around my boundaries any longer. So I'm wondering if you've drawn a line in the sand and said, I can't keep charging an hourly rate. I can't keep doing that time for money exchange. If you are ready to draw that line in the sand, it doesn't mean that, you stop doing your deliverables and suddenly business dries up. It means that you are willing to put in the hard yards to make a change right now, which is why I would love to invite you onto a call. Let's figure out what your exact next steps are. Have a one-to-one call, see if the regional experts is the right spot for you and if I'm the right person to support you. Because I think if the work you're doing is premium, then I want your authority to match it. And I think if the work you're doing is premium, the pricing needs to be premium. And the only thing that stands between where you are and getting paid accordingly is that authority piece, is that positioning piece. And it's entirely within your control. So send me the word experts. I would love to have the conversation with you. I'd love to see if you feel like you are in that over-explaining energy, which I think I mentioned on the last episode that I literally have a process for everything that I do in my business that I turn around and I hand to my clients. One of the most recent ones that I made was a sales conversation SOP. Like, how do we go through the steps of creating a successful sales conversation? And I think it's really helpful when, you're not brand new to running a business, but you've done things a certain way for a certain period of time, and it can be really hard to break outside that mold. So it's really easy, or it makes it a lot easier when someone hands you here's step one, here's step two, here's exactly how you move out of where you are right now. And I think that makes it a lot more palatable. It also makes it more actionable. And that's always what I want to do with my advice is I want it to be actionable. I want it to be something that you can take and you can implement and you can get results from. So I would love to see you guys inside the regional experts. Please send me a DM with the word experts and let's start the conversation and see if this is the right next step for you. All right, I'll talk to you next week.